Welcome to In Your Defense, Galveston and Beyond.
Welcome to the In Your Defense with Mark Diaz, a passionate criminal defense attorney with over 25 years of experience defending the rights of Texans. I'm Lisa Mosbey, your host, and today we're talking about theft and fraud charges in Texas. Mark will explain how value, intent, and the evidence in the file determine the seriousness of the case and what someone is actually facing. Welcome back, Mark. I'm interested in getting into this one with you today.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
Theft and fraud cover a wide range of situations in Texas and in everywhere, in fact. How do you usually describe what these charges involve at the most basic level?
So the theft is a tricky, theft and fraud are tricky crimes because they're crimes of moral turpitude. And so it makes future employability very difficult. No one wants to hire someone who they believe is a thief, right? And then the other thing, and this kind of goes to both theft and fraud, the dollar amount in question is always going to be the central issue that's going to point you in the direction that you're headed.
And Mark, one of the first things prosecutors look at is the value of the property or the money involved. You mentioned that. How does value influence the charge? And why can a small difference change a misdemeanor into a felony?
Again, it just goes back to the dollar amount. Each level of charge, be it misdemeanor, felony. So if you've got a C misdemeanor, a B misdemeanor, an A misdemeanor, or then any of the felony charges, each one has a dollar amount. So the dollar amount is the dollar amount, right? It's not like within $100. It's if you're over this threshold, and it could be by $10, you're going to go up to the next level. So the dollar amount is key in all of these.
And I know a lot of youngsters out there have heard of the term grand theft, maybe in a game or something. How does grand theft fit into that? Again, is that a dollar amount and that falls into the felony category?
We don't really have a grand theft in Texas.
Okay.
It's all based upon the dollar amount of the loss.
Okay. And another area would be intent. Intent is a key element in these cases. When you're reviewing evidence early on, what kinds of details help to clarify what the state believes someone meant to do?
So it's going to be different between offenses because if it is a theft like shoplifting, then typically we have video from the store and it shows someone, whatever, putting something in their shirt or their purse or what have you, and then walking out of the store without making an attempt to pay. If it's something, let's say, related to employment, and someone is accused of stealing from their employer, what evidence is there to show that anything they did was intentional? And what I mean by that is I once had a cashier who her employer accused her of her cash drawer consistently coming up empty. Not empty, coming up off. And after we did some digging, went through video and looked, we found that yes, she often was $20 short. But then we found out it's because she was getting quarters from another teller rather than going through their process. But obviously there was no intent she wasn't trying to steal $20 every shift. She was just cutting through the system to get her change faster.
Sure, that makes sense. We do it all the time. It's like you're in a rush, you have a long line, you wouldn't even think about that. Interesting intent. So what about fraud charges? Fraud charges often involve documents, transactions, maybe digital records. How does the type of evidence in a fraud case differ from what you typically see in a straightforward theft case?
In a straightforward theft case, the evidence is always much simpler, right? If you're accused of theft and then they find you with the item and there's video and whatnot. As you say, fraud often involves, for instance, businesses, employees accused of stealing from a business. So we're talking long records, paper trails, everything that we have to go through. Digital could be as well, depending upon the type of business. And then, of course, when we're talking about documents, which we don't see as much of these days, but we used to, It's trying to determine the authenticity of documents that the state is alleging are fraudulent.
How does AI playing into some of these cases?
I would say that it's not yet, but it's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, when you said that, I was like, AI, we haven't talked about that at all. So, sometimes people are surprised to learn that they're being investigated long before an arrest happens. In theft or fraud cases, what tends to signal that law enforcement is already gathering information?
There's no signal. We don't know till you get arrested. Um, we, we've seen that with large auto theft rings where people have been stealing vehicles for quite some time, have a storage place where they're keeping them, and law enforcement is onto them for a long time, but it just takes that long to build the case. Well, we don't know until you get arrested. And then we find out, hey, they've been watching you for a year.
And then in workplace related allegations, things like inventory shortages, maybe bookkeeping issues or missing funds, what makes these cases more complicated than they appear at first glance?
So it's going to depend. And first, in an employment situation, the person typically knows because they typically get terminated, right? If they're accusing you of stealing money, they're not going to keep you working there. So they terminate you, and then you come to me and say they're investigating, right? So it's going to depend upon the complexity of the organization. I've had cases where people worked for a company and created a fake employee and were paying that employee every Friday. The same thing with people that work at a company, create a side company, claim that we're paying that side company to perform some service that they're not doing. I've seen so much of it that it's hard to give you an easy answer because they're so different, right? And then what records is the company keeping that are available? Obviously, some companies are much more organized than others. Some companies perform regular audits, some don't. And so it changes depending upon the complexity of the accusation and the dollar amount in question. Because if you're dealing with a company, they could have been alleging theft for a long period of time. And so to go back and get all those records can be more difficult.
They may not exist anymore, sure. I'm sure there's situations where multiple people are involved or accused of acting together. When you review a case like that, what parts of the file matter most in understanding each person's actual role and how charges might come about?
Well, for me, I have a rule. If there's more than one person involved in the case, the one who hired me is innocent, everyone else is guilty.
I
But
understand.
no. Obviously, it plays a factor in mitigation if you're talking about guilt, because there's a difference depending upon your level of involvement, right? To where if we're going to talk about different punishment for different people involved in the same case, the role that they played should be discussed.
And if someone believes that the charges exaggerate what actually happened, what aspects of a theft or fraud case can be developed to show the facts support something less severe?
Well, that's my job, right? So that's why you and I are going to have a discussion about every aspect of the case and the evidence. And if it's the case of a job, I'm going to want to know things about your job that you won't know why I'm asking, right? But it's because I'm trying to paint a picture either for the jury, the court, or the prosecutor of why you shouldn't be in the situation that you're in.
So it all comes down to the skill level of your attorney and how much information and evidence that they can gather as when they're compiling the case. Here's where I want to leave this today, Mark. Looking ahead, why is it so important for someone facing these charges to understand how value, intent, and specific evidence shape the outcome?
So it goes back to the very first thing I said. The problem and the reason I take theft cases very seriously and fraud cases is because it is a crime of moral turpitude, which is going to make future employment very difficult. So with all theft cases, I try very hard to find a way to win or not get convicted of a crime of moral turpitude, especially for people that have a future, right? There are some people that don't care about their record and are happy to do time, but that's not the majority of people. So it just boils down again to it matters who you hire.
Thank you for your insights today. You've shed a lot of light on this, and I appreciate your time.
You got it. Thank you.
Yep, that's it for today's episode of In Your Defense. To learn more or to get help with a theft or fraud charge in Galveston, Chambers, or Harris County, visit texascriminaljustice.com. And don't forget to like, leave a review, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.